it's phase 2, which starts out by putting the tin on. This is the tin and dirt part of this whole proposition. Now, I'm assuming you've watched the video where I show you how to bend tin, which can be more challenging than you think. Honestly, I actually spent quite a bit of time figuring out how to just bend this stuff because I started with a very heavy gauge tin. But anyway, I go into that in my other video there that you have a little link for. But as you can see, it's a proposition of basically you have some right angle pieces and just some straight pieces of tin. I wanted to do a little chicken test on it, which is what that walking across it was all about. I just wanted to make sure that it was going to be adequate to support quite a bit of weight. And unfortunately, I weigh a lot more than I like, so if it can support me, I'm sure it's going to be able to support the dirt. Now that piece I just bent, you'll notice that was the thinner gauge stuff. I could not have done that with the heavy gauge stuff, which is why I had to put relief cuts in the heavy gauge stuff, as again I explained in the other video. So you see what we have here is basically a box, and I'm going to screw this tin down to the vertical supports that I have on the sides just to kind of get it up the edge. It also kind of puts the edges of the tin right up against those vertical supports, which will make them easy to cover up. And I'm not going to show you how I do that in this video, but I'll have another one. I expect I'm probably going to have about 4 or 5 videos before this whole thing is done. It was indeed a mega spring project, but I did enjoy doing it, and I really have high hopes of reaping great benefits from it. If not this year, next year, when I truly do learn how to garden. Keep in mind, I'm a woodworker, not a gardener. So as you can see here, what I ended up with is this big box, which is virtually, about 4 feet wide by a little over 24 feet long. What I want to show you is the kinds of things you encounter when you begin to build these sorts of things. So I put it together to where theoretically all I have to do is come up with some right angle pieces all the way down. And I might actually have to right angle here and here as well. I probably will. But what I've noticed is this. You have this unsupported area on both sides here. Now, by the time I get all the tin together, it might be okay. But instead of taking a chance on that, what I'm going to do is where I can, I'm going to put a piece of a 2x4 that maybe goes from here to here and comes out a little to catch that piece on both sides. Now, some places you might not be able to. So, for example, right here, you'll notice there's really nothing to attach a 2x4 to. So I might have to just maybe put another one of these over here. But however I do it, I have to support those corners all the way down, one way or the other. Now here's what we have, is the situation after I have braced it. You can see we have this brace here, and this one here, and a piece of tin. It has something to rest on right here. It's still a little bit weak here, but I'm actually going to put another piece of tin this way, and the bend on that piece of tin should fix that. So I just essentially did that all the way. We give it some support on both sides, and if you look all the way down the line, that's what we have. And that's just one of those little modifications that, you know, when you build things like this, as you go, you begin to figure out, I'm going to have to do some things here I didn't really expect, but, you know, no big deal. That's kind of the way it goes. So here's another little, I'm just going to call it a cleanup issue, because I did have to make these relief cuts in order to bend the tin in this thicker gauge stuff. So, but I don't, want those exposed. So what I'm going to do is I've cut these pieces to come down here where I can mount this here and then screw the tin to these pieces. This will end up about the same height as these two things. I am going to come back later on with some sort of trim piece that covers up that sharp edge. That's the other key issue, because we have to work here. And I'm even going to cover up places like this where the tin is just overlapping. You know, you have essentially two pieces here that overlap one another. You got another one down here, and the weird thing here is because I just put that other brace in here, this can be a little harder to do, so I had to do a little bit of artwork on a piece in order to get something that'll work for this situation. And this is exactly the kind of thing you have to do when you have these, let's just call them design as you go projects. you gotta you know, figure a few things out as you go, and we're just kind of kludging things together, and we're not buying expensive stuff that's already made for the purpose. Instead, we're taking stuff and repurposing it. So I set up my regular video camera here just so I could kind of show you how I did these extension boxes, is what I tend to call these things. And really it's the same procedure exactly. Now the key is the bend in the tin. Bends give you a lot of strength in metal, and I pretty much am going to come up with 4 different pieces of tin to do this, and then I end up mounting the tin to those vertical pieces more to get the edge of the tin kind of up against that vertical piece, because I want to come back later on and put a railing on this thing, you know, so you don't cut yourself on the tin as you're working in the garden. And you know, it's a matter, you got to drill a hole in the tin, and then you just put a little wood screw in it, and that's going to take care of it. And then of course I think the weight of the dirt will tend to hold the tin up against that side rail as well. You can see on this piece here it was kind of bent up, so I needed to sort of just kind of, you know, put it down on the bottom. And then we're going to measure for the other 2 and put those in as well. And this of course is going to give me the ability to just plant like an individual crop. I think one of them have carrots, one of them have radishes. I mean, you get the idea. As you can probably surmise, we're just about at the point where I'm ready to put dirt in. I have done a few things that I haven't shown you here. Like for example, I've gone around and reinforced corners, because I know that once I put this dirt in, it's going to start pushing things out. You take like this little piece right here, would have probably been pushed out somewhat, so I stuck this little piece on just to support it. And I've kind of, you know, just done things like that, make sure everything is supported, all the corners all the way around are somehow taken care of. Now one thing I do need to do before I start putting dirt in, I think, is centering up all the supports on the box down below, because it's going to get real heavy once I put the dirt in. So I kind of want everything, I'm just going to say in the center. Like you see, that's kind of off center a little bit, because I've actually literally moved this a little bit this way, and I would rather it be on the center, just in case as time goes on and things vibrate and move around and what have you, that it doesn't come off of those blocks. Now I would point out that when I started this project, I actually had some things attached to the fence, and that's just because I built it by myself and I didn't have somebody to hold up one end of it for me. You could build this entire structure freestanding, like out in the middle of the lawn if you wanted to. This is in effect freestanding. It's not attached to the fence at all anymore. And in fact, I actually moved it out a little bit from the fence, because I'm going to put some railing across the top to cover up all these sharp edges on the tin. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that if we don't cover up those sharp edges, that's a real potential problem. But I see a pretty easy way to just put something across the top. I mean, we'll get to that when we get to that. But right now I need to get dirt in it. I want to get the dirt in it, get that dirt sort of mixed up with the piles of manure that we have around this place and sort of get that in action. Now, there are other things I'm going to do. I'm going to put a sort of a railing system on here so that I can mount, number one, a sprinkler system. I want to be able to maintain this without having to do a lot of watering and chores associated with it. In order to do that, we have to kind of automate some stuff. To this point, this weed liner is the only stuff I've purchased for this. Everything else has been built from pallets or tin that we had around this place, or just stuff we've had around this place. That was one of the big criterias, was spend as little money as you can. And of course, the easiest way to do that is to repurpose things. So I'm going to set up the GoPro and just let it do the time-lapse mode, and you can sort of watch at least part of this whole proposition of putting the liner in and putting the dirt in. One of the things that happened to me as I was doing the liner is that the wind kicked up and tried to basically move it all over the place. So I did take some like little roofing nails and tacked it to the top of all those vertical supports, just kind of keep it in place till I get the dirt in. You know, at some point I went back and trimmed the liner down to the level of the dirt, and one reason for doing that was so I could drill holes in the sides to allow the water to drain off. But basically that's the liner procedure. So that area over there is what I refer to as Road Apple Mountain. I think most of you can figure out why I call it that. For those of you that don't know, a road apple is what comes out of the south end of a northbound horse. And when they clean the pins out, they pretty much put it all over there. Now, I've been kind of working on this little section over here, which has been here for as long as I have, longer actually, which I moved here in 2011. So I know it's some pretty seasoned manure. Right in there is where I've been working. It's fairly fine. In a way, you can't really, it kind of looks like peat moss. You can't really even tell what it is. But of course, that's critical ingredient to gardening is manure. And boy, we have no shortage of that around here. Now, initially I have really a pretty good mixture that came from the goat pen. We just moved the goats, and this is a good mixture of dirt and goat manure that I've loaded up in the truck, and of course I'm starting to stick it out here in the raised bed garden. I should probably tell you that far and away the biggest chore to this whole thing was getting all the dirt in it. If I hadn't known it was going to be that big a chore, I wouldn't have built so big a garden, I think. But anyway, hey, once you're done, and then it's good for years to come, so I guess that's okay. But the whole concept here is we want to get in a mixture of dirt and manure. You don't want 100% manure, so I want to show you how I managed to get more dirt to do this. So I was just over at the truck and loaded these two from Road Apple Mountain. So in effect they're like 100% manure. So what I'm going to do is dump them over here on this last row, which is what I took out the last time I was here. That of course gives me 2 empty buckets, which I can now fill with dirt from the next row. bucket. Then we just spade it over. In the bucket. Spade it over. Right here, we have a fortuitous advantage of using real dirt. This has worms in it, which of course is going to be wonderful for the garden. So in effect, I've just cultivated that, spaded it all up, and I've traded one shovel of manure for one shovel of dirt. The dirt I'll use over my raised bed garden, of course. Now, honestly, I'm doing this more for sentimental reasons than anything else, although I've always heard coffee grounds are good for plants in general. I had this Aunt Vi who drank a lot of coffee, and she'd always keep the grounds, and she'd put them out there in her flowers, and she'd grow things like, you know, pansies and tulips and irises, and they were always quite spectacular. So honestly, I'm doing this just kind of more in honor of her than anything else. She was such an influential person in my life that, you know, it just makes me feel a little better to do it this way. But anyway, I've raked these coffee grounds in, and that pretty much concludes the whole concept of getting dirt in the garden. Next up, we'll plant it, and that'll be our next video. Stay tuned.